remember the exact angle of the light the morning I found out. It came in like a question through the slatted blinds, thin and suspicious, cutting across the bedroom floor and landing on the place where Daniel's phone had been the night before. That sliver of sunlight would have been beautiful in any other life, the kind of accidental cinematography people used to put on mood boards, but for me it was an interrogation lamp. We had been together long enough that our mornings were algorithmic. Black coffee, the same mug with a small chip on the rim he called character, the email from my mother that always arrived at 7:03, Daniel's keys on the bowl by the door, cleaned and polished like a ritual. I liked rituals. They made the world predictable. Predictability was a kind of safe arithmetic. Input, outcome, safe assumptions, small satisfactions. We built a life on that arithmetic: savings accounts, a tiny balcony garden, a list of cities we promised to visit, and a spreadsheet with columns for rent, projects, next laptop. Everything had a cell, everything had consensus. So when his phone was not where it usually was, and he was in the shower, singing a song he never remembered the lyrics to, I waited. I could have left it. That would have been the civilized choice. But the way the light slashed the floor felt less like a question and more like a directive. I moved. There are ways to feel guilty that are not guilt. There's the peculiar shimmering shame of being implicated in someone else's secret by mere proximity. I picked up his phone because physically, practically, it was there. I told myself I would put it down. I told myself I wanted to check if he'd remembered to set the alarm for an early meeting. The lies you tell yourself are just parentheses before the truth you decide to open. The lock screen was banal. A photograph of us at a summer wedding, our heads close, his mouth open mid-laugh. The notification tray showed a thumbnail I almost scrolled past. 2 names, one I knew intimately and one I had loved without reserve. The message preview had a word I did not expect to see connected to Daniel and my sister, Miss. I learned in the small minutes after that knowledge arrives in stages. The first is a physical tightening in your chest, the second an odd, distant clarity as if you were watching someone else receiving news, and finally a practicalness settling over you so cool it resembles composure. I wasn't crying. I was dismantling what had been created around me. The message wasn't proof by itself. You learn that in graduate school, in law books, in any profession where certainty is currency. You cannot act on a word. You need patterns. But the brain is an efficient thing. It constructs trajectories from single points. One unseen thumb reaching in the dark, an unusual late voicemail from someone named Maya? In his recent calls, those were coordinates. I traced them. Daniel's messages were rarely cryptic. He liked commas and full sentences and the performative civility of grammar. This one, miss you, clipped, casual, could have been anything. People wrote to each other like weather forecasts and meant hurricanes. My sister's name, paired with his, wasn't a storm yet. It was a low barometric reading in a life I'd been told was steady. I left his phone on the nightstand, face up like an accident waiting for the coroner. A chair scraped in the shower. Steam fogged the bathroom mirror, turned the man in it into a watercolor I did not need to study. When he emerged, humming, I sat at the table and pretended to be making a grocery list. You're leaving early? I asked, because scheduling is a safe question and from it you can spin conversation like thread. Yeah, presentation in the city, he said, toweling his hair, eyes on me a fraction too long. There is a look people give when they have rehearsed sincerity. It lands like a coat, sleeves in the right places but the shoulders don't quite match. I did not tell him I had seen the message. Why escalate when the pattern must be confirmed? I had the patience of an accountant in those days, or the patience of someone who believed in spreadsheets with margins for error. I told myself I'd find out more before making an accusation. Drive safe, I said. It was the literal truth and not the only truth. He left. The door clicked. The silence that followed was not empty. It was geometrical. It pushed against the walls in angles, demanding I choose. Maya called that afternoon. Or rather, my phone lit up with her name, and for a moment the world stayed in its old orbit. People whose presence in your childhood is a kind of gravitational field have a way of making you revert to smaller histories. The sister who used to hide your shoes, the one who ate your last piece of birthday cake and claimed ignorance with blue eyes and an innocent tilt of her head. She had always been younger, both by years and by temper. I answered because our history had been almost a script. Check-ins, small sharings, exchange of clothes, triangulated loyalty with a mother who favored drama over resolution. Our calls were tea and breath. Elle, she said, do you have a minute? The word minute in her vocabulary suggested urgency packaged as modesty. People ask for minutes when they want to import a week of confession in 20 seconds. Of course, I said. What's up? Her voice was lighter than I expected, commonly breathless, that soprano of someone who always carries somewhere else a current of excitement. Can I come by? She asked. I need to talk to you. I hesitated. People like drama. People like confession. Both had been used against me more times than I could count in family gatherings and petty arguments. But I said yes. A cup for a confession. A living room for a reveal. I told myself I would be gentle. The arithmetic of pain is not always violent. She arrived during twilight, the kind of hour that softens colors and makes every room nostalgic. She brought a bag with groceries she said she would cook for us. She had that habit, a performance of domestics to lubricate the harder things. She sat and watched me like someone checking whether an equation was balanced. You're quiet, she said after a while, and it was accusation dressed as observation. Everything okay with you and Dan? You two looked serious at dinner the other week. There are many ways to begin a confession. With a thump on the table, with a whisper, with a directness that is rude but merciful. Maya chose the circuitous route. She let her fingers play with the napkin. She inhaled. And then she spoke in a voice that was both smaller and colder than I had expected. We're seeing each other, she said. The sentence should have been noise. Instead it was an object in the room you could touch. I looked at her carefully because cruelty and sincerity were the same face sometimes. She did not flinch. She said it like a statement in a ledger. You're what? I asked. The rhythm of the conversation contracted. Words narrowed. She had the audacity to look hurt, which was an instrument. Elle, it's not like that. Not like what? My voice was small and precise. A tragedy? An accident? A joke? She didn't answer. She placed a fork on the plate before her like a pause. Beyond the window the street lights came on in a patient row. It's complicated, she said finally. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did. He, we. The pronouns tangled. It should have been simpler. She with him. But we swim in pronouns when we are trying to disguise ownership. I felt something in me shift not in heat but in geometry. Anger is loud. This was architecture. I began to measure. How long? I said. There is an economy to that question. Dates, durations, and details reduce romance to algorithms. They let you see the arc. A few months, she admitted. It started after the dinner. I didn't tell you because... You didn't tell me because you were enjoying it, I said, and my voice was not accusatory so much as explanatory. Sometimes truth is a demonstration. Maya's eyes flinched. For a moment she looked like the little girl I had once swiped a lollipop from. Then she recovered that practiced blankness she used when she needed pity. I didn't tell you because I was scared, she said. The old defense. The child who steals and then explains with the voice of someone who cannot bear the guilt. I had 100 avenues of response. I could scream. I could walk out and leave the house to the dusk and to the men who had bored my routine. I could call Daniel and read him the ledger of his disloyalty in a voice that would cut clean. All of those were dramatic. All of them felt like reaction, not design. Instead I made tea. Not to soothe, but because the act of heating water and watching time through steam steadied me. To plan, you need minutes stacked like bricks. To punish without spectacle, you need to remove the theatrics. Maya did not leave until midnight. She cried in that way people practice. Hot, sudden sobs that are more about attention than repentance. She left her coat on my chair. When I closed the door, the apartment smelled like her perfume. Citrus and lit cigarettes, a scent that had always irritated me the way cheap candles irritated refined taste. I moved the coat to the closet, folding it like a sealed file. People talk about revenge as if it is heat. They put words like burn and ruin around it. But I have never been good at fire. My revenge would be arithmetic and structure. It would be a proof in which each step followed logically and there was no admission of irrationality. I knew what these two cared about. Daniel's reputation, his network, his self-image as a man who made the right moves. Maya's appetite for approval, for being the story people told about how bold she was. I would not shout. I would subtract. There was, too, a personal ledger. All the times I had forgiven before because forgiveness keeps the geometry of a family intact. Years of sewing seams quietly while others tore them. That labor had been invisible and unpaid. The discovery of their betrayal rearranged balances I had been carrying. It was time to inventory. I made a list on a scratch piece of paper that night, because lists are a form of oath. At the top I wrote, "Facts to verify." Below, in tidy columns, dates, names, possible witnesses, the small things you need to convert suspicion into demonstration. The list was a map. I liked maps. I did not sleep well. But I did not cry either. I lay awake arranging variables. The next morning I did a simple, mundane thing. I went to work. Walking into the office felt like stepping into a courtroom where the jury had not yet been seated. I kept my head down, answered emails, and let my face do the job it had always done. Neutral, competent. I had been careful in my career to cultivate an exterior that did not give away turbulence. You can use that sort of discipline like armor. I booked a dinner with a colleague under the pretense of work talk and, in the margins of the meal, asked questions that had nothing to do with our industry. I learned small things. Daniel's schedule, which events he attended, which people he trusted with his ego. I made notes. None of it was violent. It was logistical. Revenge, I had decided, would be patient. It would be the dismantling of a life via the quiet removal of supports. You take the scaffolding away and watch the building settle. No screams necessary. No cheap satisfaction. The aim is not to watch them burn, but to watch them understand, in the hollow place where vanity used to live, what they had lost. That afternoon I opened Daniel's laptop, the one he left unlocked on the sofa while he answered a call, and I began with a practiced calm to catalog. Names, dates, messages. A spreadsheet, because the world yields to columns and summations. You know something about me now. I am methodical. I measure my feelings by proof, and where proof is thin I do not act. But where proof fills into a pattern, I move with a precision that can feel like cruelty to those who mistake speed for malice. I've always believed that trust isn't emotion. It's math. It's the invisible formula balancing probability and risk. The likelihood that someone will hurt you, multiplied by the cost of the damage. Most people ignore the math because love makes them lazy. I don't ignore math. I audit it. The next week was a spreadsheet of hours. Work, gym, fake smiles, the polite rhythm of emails. Inside, my mind was a second machine, whirring through variables. Who knew about them, how deep it went, which of them would break first if I touched the right fault line? I didn't speak to Maya. Her last message, "Are you okay?" blinked on my screen like static. I archived it. I didn't delete. Deletion is emotional. Archiving is administrative. The investigation. Daniel was careful, or thought he was. Men like him believe subtlety is an accessory, not a skill. They forget that habits leave residue. A forgotten receipt in a jacket pocket, a restaurant outside our usual radius, a recurring client dinner that never appeared on his corporate calendar. I spent nights studying his digital signature. Browser history, cloud backups, timestamps that didn't align. It wasn't jealousy that drove me. It was curiosity, almost academic. I wanted to understand how betrayal replicates, whether it's spontaneous mutation or slow contamination. The first clear proof came from metadata. A series of photos stored in his shared drive, hidden behind meaningless file names. Most were ordinary, work events, sunsets, a plate of pasta from a trip to Milan. But one had reflections. In the window behind him, blurred but distinct, was the curve of a shoulder I knew too well. Maya's. I didn't feel rage. I felt confirmation. Data transforms emotion into certainty. I copied the files to an encrypted folder labeled Budget 2025. The name amused me. Budgeting pain, projecting loss. At night I planned. If revenge is an art, information is the pigment. You never start by shouting. You start by collecting. The sister. 3 days later, Maya texted again. I want to talk. Please. I let the message sit for 6 hours before replying. Dinner. Friday. My place. She agreed instantly. Guilt makes people obedient. That Friday, I prepared the table as if nothing were wrong. Wine, candles, the illusion of comfort. When she arrived, she looked almost relieved, like a prisoner misreading the warden's smile. I didn't think you'd want to see me, she said. I wanted to understand. I replied. That sentence is a scalpel. It sounds gentle, but it cuts through defense. We ate slowly. She talked too much, the way liars do when silence becomes dangerous. She said Daniel had been confused, that it just happened, that she didn't want to hurt me. The clichés came out like bad poetry. I watched her mouth move and catalogued phrases. Later I'd type them into a document titled, Statements. Language is evidence. Contradictions are coordinates. When she finally cried, real tears this time, I handed her a tissue and said, "Do you trust me, Maya?" Her head jerked up, startled. "Of course I do." "Good," I said. "Because I need you to do something for me." People think revenge requires confrontation. It doesn't. It requires participation. I told her that I'd decided to forgive them both. That I wanted to rebuild trust, to invite them over together next week and start fresh. I watched hope flicker behind her eyes, the same light you see in a deer that hasn't yet noticed the headlights. She nodded, eager, relieved. That's amazing, Elle. I was terrified you'd never speak to me again." "Oh, I will," I said. "I promise." She didn't hear the precision in my tone. The setup. That weekend, I called an old friend from university. Aaron, a quiet, competent IT consultant who owed me more than one favor. Years ago, I'd helped him salvage a fraud investigation that could have cost him his license. Debt is currency. I was collecting interest. "I need access," I told him. "To what?" "To a specific company's internal email archive. Non-destructive. Read-only. You won't even leave fingerprints." He paused. "Whose company?" "Daniel's." Another pause. I'm not asking for headlines. Just access. I'll handle the interpretation." Aaron sighed the way people do when they realize morality is negotiable. "Send me his work domain," he said. By Monday morning, I had entry into Daniel's correspondence. Nothing dramatic. No love letters, no naked selfies, just logistics. But hidden between spreadsheets and client decks were the breadcrumbs. Transfers, hotel bookings, a corporate card used twice in Paris during a week he claimed to be in Berlin. Each piece was small, almost innocent alone. Together they formed topology, a map of deceit. The equation. There's a concept in finance called compound loss. Small, repeated errors that magnify over time until collapse is inevitable. Relationships function the same way. I began designing collapse. Phase 1. Reputation. Phase 2. Relationships. Phase 3. Reflection. The first would be quiet. I drafted an anonymous whistleblower email citing potential ethical concerns within Daniel's department, attached with partial evidence of misuse. Nothing criminal, just enough to trigger an internal review. The second would be social. Maya was impulsive. Her career depended on image. She worked in PR, a field allergic to scandal. I created a series of subtle leaks, screenshots of affectionate messages, time-stamped overlaps with Daniel's corporate travel, all from untraceable accounts. Not pornographic, not sensational. Just believable. People ruin themselves on suggestion alone. The third phase was personal. That one I reserved for later. Collateral. Revenge has side effects. The hardest part isn't guilt, it's calibration. You must ensure the damage doesn't spill over to the innocent. That week I found myself worrying about Daniel's assistant, a kind woman who once helped me surprise him for his birthday. She'd inevitably get dragged into HR audits. I almost hesitated. Almost. When the investigation began, an internal memo marked confidential compliance inquiry. Daniel looked tired for the first time in months. He didn't suspect me. His arrogance was still his shield. He blamed a jealous coworker, maybe an ex-client. I watched him pace the apartment, muttering about witch hunts. I nodded, offered sympathy, brewed tea. Tea is a ritual of patience. Every time I stir the cup, I thought, one more rotation, one more step toward zero. Sister 2. Maya called again a week later, voice trembling. People at work know, Elle, someone leaked. I don't know how. I'm sorry, I said softly. People can be cruel. Elena, you swear it wasn't you? I swear nothing, I replied. But I hope you learn something from this. She started crying again. I listened politely until her sobs became inconvenient, then hung up. That night, I felt nothing like victory. Only structure completing itself. Reflection. Revenge doesn't give you adrenaline forever. It settles into you like architecture. You start building rooms inside your mind where calm lives next to calculation. I began jogging again, eating better, even sleeping. Friends told me I looked renewed. They mistook equilibrium for healing. At work, I was promoted. Timing, irony, perhaps cosmic balance. My boss said, "You've been focused lately." I smiled. Discipline helps. Daniel's internal audit dragged for weeks. Eventually, HR found no direct violation, but rumors had already spread. Clients pulled back. His boss reassigned him. The cracks in his perfect facade widened. He tried to fix them with charm, but charm is flammable when soaked in suspicion. At home, he became quiet. Distance grew, but I played my role. Supportive, serene, inscrutable. He started drinking more. He started asking me questions he'd never asked before. "Are you happy? Do you still believe in us?" I answered with small, truthful fragments. "I believe in results." He took that as affection. The final variable. It happened one evening when he stumbled home, half drunk, and slumped on the couch. The man who once lectured about integrity looked deflated, unshaven, unsure. "I think Maya told HR about the Paris trip," he muttered. "She's panicking. I should have ended it earlier." Earlier. As if betrayal had an expiry date. I sat opposite him, the room dim except for the city glow seeping through blinds. "You should talk to her," I said. "End it properly." He nodded, grateful. "You're incredible, Elle. I don't deserve you." "No," I said quietly. "You don't." He didn't hear the sentence's weight. That night, I sent the final piece. An anonymous envelope to Maya containing a single USB drive. Inside was a copy of Daniel's messages. Not the romantic ones, but the contemptuous ones. His mockery of her immaturity. His plan to phase her out gently. Revenge works best when the targets collide. Aftermath. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with chaos. Messages from both of them, fragmented, panicked, accusatory. "Maya. He used me." "Daniel. Did you talk to her? She's losing it." I ignored them. Silence is punctuation. That weekend, Daniel packed a bag and left for a hotel. Maya stopped answering calls. Family chats went dormant. My mother texted, "What happened between you girls?" I replied, "Rebalancing." Epilogue of the chapter. I didn't celebrate. I went to the balcony and watched the city like a ledger closing. Every light below was a number. Every shadow, an uncollected debt. People think revenge ends when the other person breaks. They're wrong. It ends when you no longer need the equation. For the first time in months, I felt the arithmetic quiet down. But quiet is not peace. Quiet is just the pause before the next calculation.